Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Dialogue with Prof Mandi Rukuni. My name is Kevin Kumire, and I'll be your moderator for tonight. For the past couple of weeks, we have been focusing on the de-traumatization, decolonization of the African mind. Prof has given us some interesting insights on this series so far. Tonight is a continuation of that series. Tonight we'll be focusing on mastering the African Renaissance playbook. Prof will present the topic. After Prof's presentation, the floor will be open for 40 minutes for contributions and questions. We will close the session at 7:30, and the conversation will migrate to our WhatsApp and Telegram groups, where Prof will share his final thoughts for tonight. This session will be available for viewing after 24 hours on our YouTube channel, Dialogue with Prof Mandi Rukuni. Please subscribe to always receive content. Session rules will be, please keep your microphone muted at all times. Please use the hand reaction button if you wish to ask a question or contribute. Questions and contributions can be shared with the administrator or moderator via direct messaging. Not all questions will be responded to, but will be included in the media pack, which will later be shared on our social media platforms. Welcome once again. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And greetings and good evening to everyone. So my talk tonight on the African Renaissance playbook is in three parts: the past, the present, and the future. I'm summarizing it here so that you can have an idea how I'm going to cover this topic. The past is centered around Africa being the center of origin for the human race. It took 4 million years of evolution, all of it on the African continent, to transform to the human race. And then after that, after Homo sapien, Africa still became the progenitor of all human civilization for over 30,000 years. What became civilization we know today all started in Africa over a period of 30,000 years. So that's the past. The present starts with the destabilization of the African continent after those thousands of years of evolution. So it's in three parts. The present is in three parts. There's the colonization slavery period, which covers about 400 to 500 years backwards from today. And then the post-colonial trauma and subordination period, which is the period we are in today and coming out of. It starts with the first country to be independent, which is Ghana, 65 years ago, to South Africa, which is the last 26 years ago. Then the third part of the present is what we see today as the rudiments of the African Renaissance, which has been happening over the last 20 years. The future is what we are looking at, and it's also in three parts. The reawakening of the giant that Africa is, which is going to happen over the next 30 years, culminating into the reunification of all Africans, which is going to happen over the next 50 years. And then after that, we are already going to start seeing, starting today over the next 100 years, the total reunification of the human race. So that's how I'm going to go through the talk today. So the past starts with the Africa is the center of origin of the human race. It took 4 million years to evolve from primordial animals, ape-like animals, all the way to various forms of the Homo species, up until the Homo sapien, the modern man, today, 4 million years, of which the period where the modern person has really dominated and thrived is the last 35,000 years, which is the period where people then moved out of Africa to the rest of the world. So Africa is the center of origin of the human race, and that's why you will find by the time I get to the end of my talk that the entire human race has to come to the center of origin to get its bearings for the way forward. The same happens with all species. It doesn't matter whether you grow maize today. Ultimately, if we run out of ideas how to grow the maize, diseases that attack it, we go to the center of origin, which is Mexico. Every species eventually has to go back to its center of origin to find its most diverse genes. Okay, so the second part of the past is then let's call it the Africa as the progenitor of human civilization over the last 100,000 to 1,000 years. If you look at what has happened over the last 100,000 years, I think my slides are not moving fast enough. We on the next slide here. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Right, so over the last 100,000 years, what you see is 4 million years of evolution on the African continent. If you see this diagram here, that red spot, that all of Eastern and Southern Africa is where the evolution took place. Then after that, earlier forms of Homo species crossed into Middle East and tried to get to the rest of the world, but did not succeed. The only species that eventually succeeded is Homo sapien. And you can see here that starting 100,000 years or so ago, crossing into the Middle East, and then populating what is today Europe. It took 40,000 years. So you go back 40,000 years is actually the real history of Africa. When Europeans talk about history, they make it sound like everything started in Europe and ends in Europe, but they only have a 40,000 year history. Africa has a 4 million year history, of which the last 200,000 was as Homo sapiens. And if you go east, we ended up in India and Asia before we got to Europe, and it's obvious because of weather. But you see, 70,000 years ago is when we landed in Asia, and then slowly making way into the colder parts of Asia up there. 50,000 years ago, we landed into Australia, and you'll see Australia and the islands around it has Aboriginal people who are closer looking to Africans, because those are the ones that landed earlier on, and today may not look entirely as Asians, because they moved much earlier on before that evolution. You go further east, and then only 15,000 years ago did we cross into the Americas, into North America. So North America was not inhabited by us until 15,000 years ago. And those people who crossed into North America 15,000 or so years ago were actually Asian looking, because they'd evolved Asian looking people. That's why Native Americans are closer in their phenotype to the Asians. And going all the way down to South America, which is 10,000 years ago or less. And then the whole world was populated by people who were originally Africans. Next slide, please. So whatever we know as African civilization all started with the oldest of that human civilization in Africa. And everything that we know today as modern civilization, whether it's astronomy, agriculture, the way we understand mathematics and physics, all started in Africa. All civilization started in Africa. What we know today as a gun started in Africa as a blowgun. What we know today as a battleship or a fleet liner holiday ship, all started in Africa as the canoe or a boat, houses, families, all started in Africa. Next slide, please. So that's the past. I then slice up the present, starting with slavery and colonization, which started 500 years ago, 400 to 500 years ago. And this actually is part of our present, because it is the processes that defined what we experience here today as our present. Not just the slavery and colonization, but after that, the post-colonial trauma that we've discussed in previous sessions. So we'll cover that and then the rudiments of the Renaissance. Next slide, please. So next slide, please. There's something wrong here. So as I said, the transatlantic slave trade, starting about the 15th century, when Portugal and subsequently other European kingdoms expanded their reach overseas, that's when slave trade started. And that's the history of what we call the external colonization of Africa in the medieval period. So that is important because it ultimately leads into colonization, when in 1854-55, European nations then got together and decided to slice up Africa for themselves, the so-called scramble for Africa between 1884 and 1914. Next slide, please. So then we fight for independence. So in terms of the active part of the evolution, this is where it starts getting more interesting, because as we got independent in the 1960s and 70s, we went through the first major phase after colonization, which is what I call the decade of euphoria. So of course, the decade of euphoria moves along from west, north to south, because the Southern African countries were the last to be decolonized. So, but roughly for each country that got independent, starting with Ghana, there's always an initial decade of euphoria. And that is the period where independence is just so amazingly refreshing. Political independence meant that we hoped for the best for the continent. There was euphoria around the idea of self-determination and new hope for the future, and so on. So there's no single African country of the 55 which, after gaining political independence, did not go through 6 to 10 years of euphoria. Next slide, please. Because after euphoria, almost without exception, each and every country then goes into a period or decade of disillusionment, because people then start realizing the weaknesses in the new Black government, the continuation of oppression of masses and wastage in national resources. The economies were not growing. They continued to be colonial economies, just supporting a small percentage of middle-class people. And then even within this period, you'd start seeing that the means of production were still tied to the former colonial masters. So slowly people started getting angry, disillusioned. Disillusionment means extreme disappointment in what you hoped was great. It's like having a relationship or a marriage or something like that. When it doesn't work, the anger and the disillusionment is greater than when you never had a relationship. So this is why we started having coups and that type of stuff in the 60s and 70s. People thinking that it's just that we got the wrong people into power. Meanwhile, they didn't realize that there were major structural faults with the economies and the society, which it didn't matter what you did. These were colonial economies and colonial societies that were created for us. So the decade of disillusionment, or the period of disillusionment, actually, when you look at individual countries, varies from about 6 to 10 years all the way up to 20 years in some instances. It lasts long because people are still trying to really just believe that, no, it's just because we got the wrong people in, elect new people in, and you elect the opposition party in, it does not change the situation, because there are major structural faults in society. That then leads to the next phase in this Renaissance phase. So once again, let me just go back to so as soon as we go into independence, there's euphoria, and then we have a lengthy period of disillusionment, 6 to 20 years, depending on the country. Then people realize, no, you can change governments every other day, you can change leaders every other day. It's not going to solve the problem. Then we enter a period of realism, which started almost around 1985 to about 2000, 15 years, where we're beginning to see, started, in my opinion, with the honeymoon with the structural adjustment programs, which initially, well, they're forced on us by the World Bank and the IMF. But after taking them on, it actually worsened poverty and inequality. So the realization that there are deeper issues, it's not just adopting Western style economics or political systems that's gonna lead to development. In an electoral democracy is not equal to development. You can have elections every other 4 or 5 years. It doesn't mean you're going to have democracy. It's a complicated relationship. People were realizing that we need to seriously examine our situation, and that realization that there are deeper structural faults in society that needed deeper analysis and deeper debate became a very important turning point. That's why I call the period realism, because that's when you start seeing Africans saying, oh my goodness, we did well with the organization of African unity, decolonizing Africa, bringing relative peace, but now we need to really talk more seriously about who we are as Africans and how to move forward. So from the period of realism, that really takes us to the next period, because from there, we start seeing rudiments of the Renaissance. Africans realizing we're not going to get out of this easily. It's not as easy as just elections. It's not just as easy as adopting Western style economics. It's about who we are as Africans and how we have cultural content in our strategies for development. Next slide, please. That's why the rudiments over the last 20 years, including the formation of the African Union. But if you see what has happened over the last 20 years, there's been philosophical and political movement towards unity amongst Africans, ending violence, wars, ending corruption and meaningless elitism, and actually a period of reawakening and realizing that there's need for Africans to have one movement towards a desired future. So there's been greater political and economic convergence starting around 2000, ultimately leading to the formation of the African Union in 2002. And it's a very ambitious agenda, but important agenda. There's been relative strengthening of the regional bodies, starting with our traditional regional economic communities, SADC, ECOWAS, et cetera, greater calls for reunification of the continent. There's more talk and more focus on how we restructure our systems to truly African systems. Discussions that we have had in this forum, and of course many other bigger and more important forums than ours, but all the same, all focused on mindset shifting towards African solutions to African problems. Okay, the solutions that come from within are going to be more meaningful. And right now, we're now faced with Africans really trying to figure out very aggressively, how do we reform the educational system? How do we use our languages for our own development? How do we converge economically and politically? You can see the greater drive, although we are in a tight spot because we have signed a lot of really terrible trade agreements with Europe and other places. But now we are talking about trading with ourselves, opening up ourselves, free trade areas. So these are the rudiments of the African Renaissance that's been happening over the last 20 years, which takes us into the future, because we are now faced with the future. The future is in three parts. First is, of course, the awakening of the giant, and then the reunification of all Africans. And then thirdly, the reunification of the human race. So starting, next slide, starting with the reawakening of the giant, it's gonna be happening, it's happening now. The giant is reawakening, and it's happening now that African region is now searching for its collective memory, where our collective memory was broken. Our collective memory is in our genes, in our DNA, because for 4 million years, the progeny of the human race is in our genes right here. The understanding of what happened for 30,000 years before we populated the rest of the world is in our genes. And because it was broken 400 or 500 years ago through slavery and eventually colonialism, it's a very short space of time. So Africa today is already regaining its collective memory, which is very important. And there's emerging an Africa with a strong cultural identity, stronger and stronger common heritage, search for common values and ethics. There is emerging a consciousness of a victoriousness which never existed before over the last 400 years. So that awareness of our collective history and future is what is running through every African who is concerned. And now we are recreating, we are mending the DNA so that we actually have African cultural software to run our development agenda as we advance our society. So the reawakening of the giant is also coming through the economic realization that we can't forever be exporters of raw materials. And Africa is now figuring out ways for mass producing our own raw materials, mass manufacturing our own raw materials, and mass consuming of our own products. We are looking at reforming the educational system, reinterpreting science for ourselves, because science, the way it was developed by the Newtons of this world and other prominent scientists, is just to be adjusted, because Africans had a very unique way of understanding nature, and their intuition was deep, because you cannot rely only on what you measure through your 5 senses. Africans knew that. So the reawakening of that science, which Europeans did not understand before. We understood psychic visioning as purely natural before Europeans knew it. They thought it was witchcraft. We understood the relationship between the spiritual and the physical world before Europeans understood that. So our mass education is going to bring back those cultural elements. So as we, over the next 50 to 100 years, become the most technologically advanced society in the world. But that is to start by ensuring that our children learn these things from day one. This Renaissance is taking 30 to 50 years in its starting blocks, because it requires a whole generation of new Africans who are brought up differently to the way we were brought up. These are Africans who are brought up from day one with a dose of collective memory of being African, with an understanding that we are a victorious people who are as advanced as any in the world. If people don't have that in the first 5, 6, 7 years of their lives, it is always going to be truncated. So that's why I'm emphasizing the point that we're reaching a point where once we declare our mass education to ensure that every young African who's born is going to be consciously aware of the uniqueness of being African and the central role that African plays on the continent, and that the future belongs to Africa. If that is the generation of people who are going to connect the disconnect that happened 400 or 500 years ago with colonialism and slavery. Next slide, please. The next phase of the future over the next 50 years is the reunification of all Africans, diaspora Africans, and those on the motherland. That reunification is starting today. It's just going to accelerate faster and as we become more prosperous as Africans, it's going to be stronger. Africa will be a much stronger nation, united, resilient, and a very influential player on the global continent. Today we are pretty influential, but you see, we are influential in areas where the colonial system and post-colonial system cannot suppress. You know, the unique talents of Africans in every field, whether it's science, music, sport, it doesn't matter what it is. That's now going to be unleashed in every sphere of life. In Africa, that is people-driven, as envisioned in the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. So that prosperity, that integration, and our natural historic ability for good governance, because Africans were historically the most consultative people, decisions were made by consensus, there was high level of consultation, everyone was part of the process. That is actually what's going to ensure a reunified Africa and a peaceful and secure Africa in the next 50 years. Next slide, please. So finally, listen to me carefully, believe it or not, humanity is at a tipping point. We're at crossroads, we're in deep trouble right now as I speak. What we call the advanced countries and the industrialized countries brought us great things through entrepreneurship and innovation, but they brought us huge troubles in promotion of individualism and consumerism and lack of respect for the environment and so on, and dividing the human race. So that is where we are right now. We are at the crossroads. And the human race, if it does not rediscover the collective effort, if it does not rediscover what it means to be part and parcel of the environment, we face extinction. We may not like to hear this, but we face extinction on this planet because the universe and the planet Earth is more powerful than we think we are. It can just eliminate us anytime. So although humans are intrinsically good, but what has been promoted by Western civilization is bringing out the worst out of the human race. We become selfish and conflicted. So this is why it becomes important once Africa is reunited and we start playing a leading role in the world. Africa is what's going to unite the rest of the world. How? Because we are the only people in the world who have no desire, for some reason. I don't think because we are stupid. It's because we are the center of origin of the human race. We are the only people in the world who have no desire to go abroad and usurp other people's resources, colonize other people, and all that. It's not, don't think it's because we're stupid. It's because we're the center of origin. It's not necessary. Wherever you are, you can make the best of the world. And you relate to the rest of the world through what I'm going to cover in the last slide as the three mutualities that guide humanness, Africanness. This is how it's going to happen. This is how Africa, once it becomes prosperous and a major player in the world, will help to unite the world. It's because of the three mutualities. We understand mutual respect, we understand mutual benefit, we understand mutual responsibility, because once those three are in play in the world, in the United Nations and all these global World Trade Organizations and the World Health Organization or the UN, these entities today do not understand mutual respect. They think some are holier than others. They don't understand mutual benefit, because as long as it doesn't benefit already advanced countries economically, whatever it is that is supposed to bring greater prosperity to the rest of the world is thwarted. So then the United Nations fails to provide mutual responsibility or mutual accountability, because there's only a few in the Security Council who make decisions for the rest of the world. But when we have these three African values, mutual respect, mutual benefit, and mutual responsibility guiding us, we'll be able to accept others, we'll be able to understand what responsibility for maintaining respect is. Individual and collective values will be promoted, and relationships will be more meaningful. I think if you press a few more buttons there's a few other things that are covered in there, because ultimately you see communication and conversation between nations across different ethnic groups, tribes, improves decision-making at all levels. Africa is going to save the human race within the next 100 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that presentation. I now open up the floor for questions or contributions. Please use the hand reaction button and we'll free your mic so you can talk. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, but first allow me to introduce myself and to definitely do the necessary protocols. Thank you, Professor Rukuni. My name is Jonathan Moringani. I'm based in Norway. I'm interested in what you're doing and in what we are doing as Africans. My question then is, I see that this is a grand vision. So this is like a grand theory, right? Which is not only abstract, but also very practical. But is there a place of operationalizing it to the grassroots level? So in other words, where is the role of nations and even of regions and even of the local communities? Because our leaders always talk about we, but when you go to we, the people on the ground, in Mashingo, in Rusape, in Gauteng, or anywhere else in Africa, we find that the local communities are away from this dream. They are missing or they are missed. So how can we make this operationally possible at the lowest level? So I'm talking about devolution in essence. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for that. Any other questions or contributions? Please use the hand reaction button and we'll free your mic. Prof, would you like to respond to that whilst we wait for other people to ask?
Sorry, there's Jekesai.
Yeah, thanks, Prof.
All right.
Yeah, I've just been unmuted. Thank you very much. So my name is Jekesai, and I wanted to ask, you spoke at some point about the metaphysical, and I'm really mostly interested in agriculture. And it seems the world is coming back to its senses and coming almost back to Africa with the big drive on regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture, things that possibly we would have done before we got into conventional agriculture. And obviously with things like the metaphysics, we had ways of knowing that this seed is good and preserving it for, good production and so on and so forth. It was a science, but that seems to have been lost to us. I believe part of that renaissance of Africa will come through agriculture. Do you believe the same? And if so, what further insights do you have, being a man of the soil yourself? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Thanks so much, Jonathan, for your comment and question. So my experience over the especially last 10 to 20 years is that things are happening on the continent. It's no longer about us who are the kind of intelligentsia or in this place and that place. So I've looked across at how devolution, which is, because you're right, you're exactly on the right track. How is devolution going to happen? Well, devolution is happening against all the will by the former colonial powers and those who may be in power in our own governments who don't see the big picture. Here's how it's happening. The number one development is that it doesn't matter what country you look at, Jonathan, they are either in a middle income trap or in a low income trap. There is nowhere to go. It's going backwards. What's happening is these economies are dual economies. The domestic markets are small. There's no manufacturing happening. The cities are growing fast, but they're growing fast with no jobs in the cities. They're growing fast because people are just running away from rural areas to get better services in the cities. So it's services that's pushing people from rural to urban areas, no jobs. Whereas we know that real advancement is when urbanization is pushed by manufacturing and sucking labor from the rural areas, because factories are short of labor, producing products for the entire economy, rural and urban. So already that alone, the idea of us having thoroughly deformed economies with structural faults that end us up in middle income traps, means that there's no choice. The informal so-called sectors will dominate in these economies. It doesn't matter which country you look at. Africans are already creating their own economy, what I call indigenous commerce. We can have a few big companies manufacturing this, that, and the other. You lure big investors to do this, that, and the other, but 80 to 90% of the economy is what I call proto-industrialization. Africans manufacturing stuff without factories. What's happening is Africans going outside the so-called formal sector and manufacturing almost anything. In due course, they will manufacture even aeroplanes if we continue sidelining them. So that's the first thing that is forcing the devolution or decentralization of the continent. Secondly is, in this case, also answering Jekesai's question, then we have so many things bringing back the realization to Africans that what we have been running away from is actually really what's good for us. And COVID was a very good example, showing us that everything about our upbringing, every department has a serious fault in the way we understood life as Africans. So take COVID, for instance. Education. COVID exposed us that whether you're talking about health education or medical education, it doesn't cover the understanding of the body and what really health is. Medicine is not health. Now we know that medicine is not health. Now we know that the body is designed to heal itself. It's not designed to be pumped with inorganic medicines from somewhere else. We now know that for every herb, for every tree, for every shrub, for every grass you see, it will solve some problem that you have, but you just don't know it because we, as Africans, we stopped relating to our environment the way we used to, because we used to watch ourselves. What happens when we eat different types of food? We used to watch the birds, watch the animals, and then understand how we are part of that environment and how eating and living healthy within that was the answer to the problem, not pharmaceutical industries. COVID has also told us that, listen, what you thought was important, if you think education can only happen in classrooms, now we show you that actually education should be happening at home, which is what Africans always knew. COVID has also showed us that if you thought business is closing yourself out into some building somewhere and having meetings and flying around, well, now we're going to show you that you don't need to fly around. You don't need expensive buildings to run businesses. It can all happen. God, who is, our creator. If you think religion is God, now COVID has shown you that religion is not God. It's just another institution constructed by human beings to meet their own fears, because the creator is far more advanced than creating some doctrine and then going into some building that you and then reading some book to be saved. So the long and the short is, fortunately, devolution and the rejuvenation of society is going to happen anyway, whether we like it or not. It's just that Africans have now woken up. That's why we are in the rudiments of Renaissance, because against all odds, it's now becoming very clear that we as Africans don't need to copy and paste somebody else's culture. We don't need to copy and paste anyone's system. They may look attractive. The United States or China may look attractive. Tall buildings, they can fly around, they can do this, that, and the other. But we also know that one day something can just happen and make all that meaningless. Okay, so I think that we're in the right time, the right spot to accelerate the African Renaissance. And I think that in every country, my own country, Zimbabwe, I can see it on a daily basis. It doesn't matter who thinks what, the opposition party, the ruling party, the educational system, professors, what, it doesn't matter what all these institutions think. Things are happening, which is opening up people's eyes that there's a better way forward. You can eat healthier. You don't have to eat all this junk, import junk, pay for it, when you can actually eat healthier food of your own. So I think that whether it's our ancestors playing a big time or it's our creator just showing themselves that we are the real creator, whatever it is, there's no doubt in my mind that African wisdom and our understanding of life and our approach to life is the original way that all humans are going to have to come back to. Respect each other. Look at how we all mutually benefit, including non-people, the environment. How do we collectively be accountable to each other rather than just thinking there's one or two policemen to police the rest of the world? All that is going to bring back the human race to its senses. And if Africans fail to reunite Africa and reestablish ourselves, the rest of the human race is going to go down the chute. That's my prediction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Any more questions or contributions? We have a question in the inbox. One is asking, Prof, can you speak more on the role of agriculture in the Renaissance?
You want me to do that now, or I'll wait for more questions?
Are there any more questions? I think you can respond to that whilst we wait for more questions or contributions.
Thank you, Kevin. The role of agriculture in the Renaissance is central. That's the starting point. Why do I say this? It is because for two major reasons. The connection of rural areas and urban areas to become one society, one economy, where it doesn't matter whether you're in rural, urban areas, the economy is the same, the incomes are the same, levels of prosperity are the same, prices of goods and services are the same. When the rural and the urban economies become one society, one market, okay, then the prospects for major advancements then exist. Now, for that to happen, agriculture is always the starting point, because at early stages of development of which most of our economies in Africa are, anything between 60 to 80% of all raw materials that go into the manufacturing sector will come from the rural areas, will come from agriculture. Now, the second point is, if you go into the rural areas, you could actually see that anything between 70 to 95% of the rural population, depending on which part of Africa you are in, 75 maybe to 95% of the population in rural areas are always, one way or another, part of the food system. They're either in agriculture or in the food system. So it doesn't. So the problem with the way the traditional institutions understand structural transformation, if you look at the way the IMF and these World Banks and other institutions miss the point, is that they don't focus on the fact that the structural transformation process to move from a predominantly agrarian society to a predominantly urban industrial society requires that the mass production of raw materials, mostly agriculture, goes into the mass manufacturing or processing of the same products, and then the mass consumption of manufactured goods and services by the same people. So you find today that the emphasis is just mass produce raw materials and then export them, or mass produce raw materials and send them to the urban areas for manufacturing. No, real structural transformation where you have the majority of your population in the middle classes happens only when you have mass production of raw materials in the rural areas. Grains, oil seeds, animal products, pulses, whatever it is, milk, herbs. When the mass production of those products are 80% manufactured within a space of 50 kilometers to 100 kilometers. So it's a mass production of raw materials and mass manufacture it in the villages and townships. Then mass consume on manufactured products in the same country. Then you have a powerful, powerful, powerful economy. Because now you see what has happened to China and the United States. They consume almost everything that they produce. Exports are a minor thing for them because the domestic market is huge. That is the kind of transformation Africa has to go through. And agriculture is the starting point. And as I said, within agriculture, the food system is always the starting point. Why? Because everyone is food. Everyone is in the food system, you know? So that's the natural starting point. If those people who are mass producing raw materials like grains, maize, sorghum, millets, they're producing beans, they're producing different herbal products, they're producing different animals, chicken. When those people who produce these agricultural products end up with a secure food system, in other words, they themselves will guarantee 3-4 meals a day without a problem. They don't even worry where the next meal is going to come from. Number two, the same people have a bit of money in their pockets, just $4 to $10 average a day in their pockets. When they have those two things, a full stomach and no worry when the next meal is coming from. A bit of money in the pocket, not lots of money, very little money, $5, $10 extra in the pocket. When they have those two things, the rural person is now behaving like true middle class. They start consuming more manufactured goods. They start consuming more fruits, more vegetables. Now you have wealth circulating within the same community. That's why there's no informal sector. It's proto-industrialization. If somebody is manufacturing noodles like the Chinese used to do in the 80s, remember the Chinese were poorer than us. But when they embarked on this process I'm explaining now, they start producing noodles in the village, in the township, without factories. 20, 30 years later, they're not only well-fed, they're now exporting noodles to us. And now we think they started producing noodles for us. They never started producing noodles for us. They were producing it for themselves in the village. Now it's an export product because they have saturated their domestic market, which is huge. Now they can export. So sorry to make it a lengthy answer, but it is so central to understand why the transformation of Africa from an agrarian society to an urban industrial society requires understanding of the role agriculture plays there and how, at the end of the day, real progress comes when within the rural area, you have those three processes happening at the same time: mass production of the raw material, mass processing of it, and mass consumption of it. Don't wait for the urban. The urban then kicks in because now you see a proliferation when people's livelihoods rise, like I've explained. Now you see a proliferation of small machines for everything that's consumed in the townships and villages. You see leather industry coming up, textile industries coming up. You see all sorts of machines processing these, picking teas, picking that, and so on and so forth. And those small machines, as they proliferate, that becomes the market for the heavy industry, because now you can have steel industry because there's many small machines everywhere, in the village, in the township, in the small towns, in the towns. Now we in Africa, we're colonized in the economic sense. So you just have one big steel mill or another one there. Then we think that is economic development. No, you go to a small little country in Asia, like Vietnam or Malaysia, you see dozens of steel mills. Small country with lots of steel mills. Why? Because they've got a huge rural economy that's buzzing. They've got a huge proto-industrial process happening, leading into the what you call light industry, the small machines. It's those small machines which are the demand base for the heavy industry. That's how heavy industry comes up. You have not just many steel mills, but you'll have lots of foundries, because with thousands and thousands of small machines, you can't always wait to get spare parts from that city or from export. You start seeing foundries in the townships prefabricating spare parts. A bearing is broken for this machine, they stop importing it, they prefabricate it at the foundries. That's how an economy grows. It starts with agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that. Any questions or contributions?
There's a question in the group, in the chat. It says, what role of African play or have played in the multilateral institutions such as the World Bank to accelerate or decelerate the process of transformation? Any reflection, Prof, on your involvement in the past? We see Africans serving in these institutions to the service of Africa. Shall I answer that one?
Yes, there's also another question here. What leads the process of transformation? Is it the political systems or is it the cultural system? As Western scholars also grapple with this question, the first is quick to change and the second is slow to change.
Yeah, let me start with that one because it's the easiest answer to give. You go into any field of management, leadership, transformation, the conclusion is culture will trump strategy any day. Culture will beat strategy, will actually eat strategy for breakfast any moment, as Peter Drucker said, because culture is the subconscious mind of a society. You don't think, you act, okay? So there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that the African Union, although they're on the right track, they are still afraid to push this point. Once Africans believe in themselves again, 75% of what is transformation is confidence in one's own culture. And it doesn't have to be 100% right because there's no culture which is 100% right. But the important thing here is that everything that we place value on is based on culture because it's your subconscious mind. It's how you were brought up. By the time you're 7 years old, it's all there. You know, if something is sweet because it's got lots of sugar, you place value on it. Not because sugar is more valuable than other complex carbohydrates, which don't release so much sweet sugar at the time you are eating it. But you buy a cereal, you buy whatever you buy as a youngster, you are used. Sugar becomes the dominant value that you place. Then we then end up growing up and then we think these products are more valuable than others. But it's you who places value on it. That's why today, my guess is 90% of the products we consume from the industrialized world are junk. But we place more value on them because we are adopting their culture. I mean, why do we pay so much money to go to a food court to buy junk food? You buy a hamburger, you buy a Kentucky chicken, which is greasy. When your own mother or wife will cook you a much healthier chicken for much less. But you're buying culture. You just want to be part of the culture. You put on jeans which are torn from top to bottom because it looks cool. Is it really? Well, because you place value on it. It's not that a pair of jeans which are torn at the knees are more valuable than the ones which are nicely ironed out. You place value yourself. There's nothing with the value in life. It's what value you place. And we've been colonized to place value on things which are junk. Okay, that's why culture will trounce all this analytical strategy at any time. You just have to rebuild the collective memory of what kind of culture makes us place more value on people. How do we bring ourselves up again to respect each other? How do we bring ourselves again to understand that you cannot just benefit yourself and be the billionaire? Everyone else has to benefit and have a good life. How do we bring up ourselves to understand that we will never save the environment if we don't have a collective understanding that it has to be saved? If somebody thinks it to be exploited, cut down all the trees to make billions, somebody thinks you hunt down all the animals. So if you don't have a collective understanding, of how we are all accountable to each other. How are you going to achieve that? It's culture. So that's why Jonathan's question, I'll just answer. Culture will trump everything any day. And African Union has just got to be confident to say, Africans have to rediscover our understanding of our values and rediscover what it is that the collective memory that made us such a great people in the past. Then around the multilateral institutions in the world, well, I think I kind of partially answered the questions. Jonathan, at my age, and I'm getting closer to 70, I can say it more boldly without fear. I have seen over the last 40 years that I've been a professional, how some young, inexperienced, smart ass kid will come from IMF, World Bank, name whatever. They'll fly into my country or your country, and they've got a PhD, and they've got these, they've got all the analytical skills, they carry laptops with all the information in the world, they have access to the data of your country, they can tell you, they can show you all the graphs of how your economy has grown over the last 20 years, but that person has never worked for the government, they don't know how an economy actually works, they've never actually worked in any system that is national, but they're coming to advise your minister, and your minister will clear her desk or his desk to see these youngsters who know nothing except speak big, and they advise you how to run your country. That's how we fell into the structural adjustment program. That's how even today we go to the World Trade Organization, we go to these big multilateral meetings, we are not prepared, we don't speak their technical language, and we just go there believing they know what they're doing. And when we get our Africans in those systems, it's only early. I'm not blaming the Africans because we never controlled these institutions in the past. There's more of us Africans in these institutions now. And what the heck, we just got in there. So we're also having a bit of fun, creating jobs for our own relatives and friends. Why not? Because the whites have been doing it forever. So I'm not saying it's the best thing to do. I'm just telling you why it happens like that. But the long and the short is that Africans in these multilateral agencies would not be there if they were not using Western paradigms in their understanding of how society functions, how the economy functions. You go in there because you've impressed your Western shareholders. You've impressed the bosses that you speak their language and you use their paradigms. So it's only now that I'm seeing more and more Africans in these institutions now beginning to realize, oh my God, we are not, Africa is not progressing anyway. It's about time we became more honest with ourselves. It's about time we started re-examining who we really are. Why is it that no African country is a high income country? Not one, not even South Africa, far from it. So why is it that with all the advice from the IMF, World Bank, African Development Bank, name all these big institutions, why is it that after 60 years of advice from these institutions, we don't have one high income country on this continent? It's because it's just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. These economies were never designed to run the way that their general equilibrium models tell them. Those models are for already industrialized countries. So they come here and tell you, oh, here's how we increase employment. But the reality is that these economies have got major structural faults, which have to be corrected first before those paradigms can be relevant. But you know what it is, Jonathan, you had a big job, you drive a 4x4, you can fly around. A lot of us can take that rather than go into deeper understanding of how we can trigger a true renaissance on the African continent. So I'm sorry it sounds a bit cynical, but I think I can say so because I know we're also coming out of it. We're also beginning to realize that these institutions can work for us better, and I think we're going for better times. in the next decade or two. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Any more questions or contributions? Any questions or contributions?
Looks like we're done, eh?
It seems there are no more questions coming in. So, Prof, if you'd like to close off the session with some thoughts before we migrate the conversation.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I just want to say two things in conclusion. I'm going to say them. I've already said them, but because they may sound weird, I'll say them again. Then you can go home really thinking, yeah, the guy is old and weird. But I can tell you, after my 40-some experience all over the world, I've been most places to be able to tell myself, I've seen enough to tell myself, Africa is not just the best place, but we are going to be the future of the whole world. So here are the two reasons why. And if we have to remember this all the time, put that at the highest level of our desired future. It's not today, it's this understanding of, first and foremost, that there's no real future of humanity if Africa doesn't get right. Please, people, there is no part of the world, Europe, Americas, Asia, they're all consumed by the same disease of consumerism and wanting to be the world's dominant force, colonizing the rest of the world or neo-colonizing. North America, Europe, and Asia are all, in my opinion, caught the same disease. I think individualism, the way individual countries or nations progress and dominate is going to change the course of humanity. Big problem. Africa is the only people who have no desire to go and commandeer other people's countries, commandeer other people's resources, enslave others. Africa, therefore, is the future of humanity. So people, you may not want to believe what I'm saying. And we won't be here, most of us, to say, but I'm predicting this. I'm predicting this. When Africa gets its act right, we will then restore humanity because we're the center of origin. We will bring back mutual respect amongst all peoples. We'll bring back mutual benefit in the way we run continental and global business. The United Nations will change when we become a major global player. And we will show the world how to be mutually accountable to each other. So that's the first thing I want to say in conclusion. If Africa fails, and it will only fail because we don't want to succeed. Africa is always turned the corner. There's already foiled neocolonialism. Slavery and colonialism failed to kill African belief systems. Slavery and colonialism and neocolonialism failed to dilute and kill off African culture and African worldviews. They cannot. So for that reason, and that reason alone, there's no more fear that holds Africans back. We can only die individually. We can only fail individually, but collectively we won't fail. All that remains for us to succeed, there is the most important second point. First point, if Africa does not regain its global significance, humanity is going to go extinct. Number two, if Africans don't assert ourselves now not tomorrow. Now, if the African Union leading us does not assert our position in the world tomorrow and say, people, it doesn't matter where you are. If you are in the United States, you better stop putting your knee on African people, because we are going to be there asking you, we will make sure you won't come to our continent to do business with us. It doesn't matter where you are. You touch one of us as Africans, you have touched all of us. We're not going to allow disrespect of Africans. We're not going to allow abuse of Africans anywhere in the world. And any African in diaspora, we are here for you. The African Union does not need anything. You don't need any gun. You don't need any money. You just need a collective voice of 55 heads of state signing that statement and making sure that our institutions, our multilateral institutions, the African Union, NEPAD, the regional bodies, apply it. We don't have to give the responsibility to individual countries. Then we will have asserted ourselves to fast forward the African Renaissance so that we can save the rest of the world. All right, thank you very much. Those are my last words.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Appreciate Prof for sharing this knowledge and taking time to be with us in this session. Big shout out to the DWP technical team for putting this session together. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Dialogue with Prof Mandi Rukuni, where we'll be able to share more content and you'll be up to date with the content we'll be posting. Let's migrate the conversation to WhatsApp and Telegram, and Prof will share his final thoughts for tonight. Thank you and good night.